Hello, everyone, and welcome back to CLI's Legalpreneurs Spotlight Future 50 series. In this series, we're showcasing thought leaders and doers in legal innovation, legal tech, and AI all around the world. And today, I'm joined by three amazing people. We're gathered for our annual year in review. Now, folks, you probably can't believe this, but this is our 6th year on looking back on the year that was, seeing what stuck, what didn't in legal innovation, tech, and of course, AI very much in the last year or two. We're going to wrap at the end as well by doing a little bit of crystal ball gazing for 2025. I really do have three amazing guests today. Karen Sandler, Partner and Chief Knowledge and Innovation Officer at Gilbert and Tobin and Co-Chair of the CLI Advisory Board. Yay! Graham Grovem, who is the Head of Legal Technology and Client Services at Allens, and Tessa Van Doan, who's CEO and Practice Leader at Moores, and of course, also a CLI Advisory Board member. Yay! Don't feel left out, Graham. We love you.
How can I not feel left
out? Thanks so much for joining me today, everyone. It's really, really great to see you and welcome back for year 6. Karen, I'm going to kick us off with a question for you, but I'm going to try and set it up a little bit for you to start. As I look back on 2024, and perhaps as you folks do as well, it seemed like the year of AI experimentation in legal practice. It seems like we're kind of pushing into the broader regions of innovation and using tech as an enabler. But I'm wondering where we actually got to in terms of AI maturity, and if we've moved beyond the chatbots or task-based efficiencies in a way and kind of into complex problem solving with it. So Karen, what made a difference to how we did legal work in 2024? And did you see a difference between what law firms were doing and what was happening in-house?
It's a great question, Terry. And I think it's probably fair to say at the outset that I think there is a spectrum of activity happening. I think you are seeing some organizations more at the, so-called mature end, and others that are still very much experimenting or understanding what the technology is capable of. So particularly in reference to your question around what difference to legal work does it make, I think I would say we are seeing quite a lot of experimentation with the technology. I think the beginning part of 2024, people were still trying to wrap their heads around the technology. I think obviously it raised a number of legal issues. It raised a number of issues for organizations where they needed to work out, what client engagements looked like, what client terms looked like, how they would use documentation or how they would use generative AI in the context of the courts, how would they utilize it for transactions, what does it mean to train a model. So I think there was a lot of sort of what I would consider to be fundamentals happening in the beginning of 2024. And then I think a number of people and organizations were looking at the technologies out there. So I think there has been quite a heavy year from what I have observed of piloting and experimenting with the technology, both in terms of third-party technologies, but also in terms of building and seeing what might be possible internally for certain organizations. I think I would say towards the middle, I actually think there was a little bit of sort of that hype cycle in play where people are like, oh, actually, maybe this is not going to do quite what it has promised to do. I actually think we're seeing that maybe taper off a little bit towards the back end of this year, and that I think maybe the legal profession has come around to sort of say that, yes, we understand there are enormous sort of challenges with the technology, but there are also enormous opportunities, and it's about finding those opportunities. And I think people are really excited about it. So towards the back end of this year, I think, in 2024, we've certainly seen that experimentation. We've certainly seen, organizations piloting, but I do think it's more the ad hoc pieces around efficiency at the moment, which has been focused on. And well, we'll get to the predictions as to where I think that might go in 2025. But I think we are starting to see definitely the technology being capable of doing things that, frankly, I've been in this domain for a number of years. We've never seen technology being capable of doing these types of things. So for your efficiencies on a day-to-day basis, we are absolutely starting to see that. But it is not utilized throughout the industry. There is no doubt about that.
Graham, I want to come to you specifically on the tech piece, but before I do, just wanted to pick up on the point that you made, Karen, and get your thoughts, Tessa and Graham, on this. I too think that there's been almost like a mindset shift from what the tech cannot do to what it can do, but understanding the limitations on that. And it's a really different way of thinking about this, and it has a really different impact, I think, on the practice as well. So Tessa, can I ask you just on that mindset question, did you see that as well?
I've definitely seen it. I think in the seat of a sort of mid-sized law firm, we have to be looking at the opportunities as opposed to the challenges. But to your point about that mindset shift, I think we need to sit and acknowledge that that is so revolutionary for lawyers when you're dealing with an industry of people that generally have this negativity bias. We go straight to the problems, the challenges, and want to solve for those. I have been struggling over the last few years with that mindset shift and constantly coming up against, a mindset within the workplace around, well, what's wrong? What is the problem here, as opposed to what's great about it and what's the opportunity? But interestingly enough, with specifically Gen AI tools for us, and generally the open market ones, people have actually shifted. And I think, how am I going to replicate that? Like, I really need to kind of hang on to that and understand what factors have driven this mindset shift so that I can try and replicate it in other areas across the practice.
Well, if you figure that out, that would be amazing, and let the rest of us know, because this is a one-off instance that I've never seen before of people just enthusiastically embracing things.
Tessa's going to capture the secret sauce and then share it with the entire ecosystem. That would be fantastic. So Graham, just on that mindset piece, I'm going to come to you with a question on tech, but just on that mindset piece, have you seen that kind of revolutionary change as well?
I think so. I mean, it is interesting, and we've really captured the public's imagination, even within the legal industry, of just what is possible. And people that previously hadn't even contemplated it are now thinking, well, can it do this? And we see questions all the time, which are really exciting and good questions, because it shows people are engaged, and they're asking, can I do this with generative AI? Quite often the answer is no, or maybe imperfectly. And it's actually one of the things that I find really interesting. I spend much of my day asking, for example, Perplexity how to do something, because I could spend hours figuring it out myself, but I don't need to anymore. And that's the thing I tell everyone all of the time. If you've got a question about whether Gen AI can do something, go and ask Perplexity what the best way is to do it. And it will come back and tell you. And it will give you like step-by-step instructions as well. It is just amazing. And of course, the other generative AI applications now that are bringing in web content as well can do the same thing. So it's really pushing us along, but there's still a little bit of a mind shift left, I think, to get people to take control of the question that they're trying to solve for, and not just say, well, I don't know how to do it and nobody else can tell me, rather than asking the system that you're actually trying to figure out how to work in the first place.
Yeah, and as Karen said, it's definitely patchy. We've definitely got folks in terms of, I guess, digital literacy at the very least, running the full gamut from still zero, actually, all the way through. Graham, let me ask you specifically about the tech, and it's a big one because there's been a lot, as Karen mentioned, there's been a lot coming down the pipeline, and there's been a whole bunch of additional, I think, jargon or language that people have got to get familiar with. So I think we were just getting familiar with large language models. Now we've got small language models. We kind of knew what a RAG was, but we maybe didn't. And now we've got AI agents and they're taking over the world. And so I think that, it's been a lot for folks to wrap their head around. So I'm just wondering, in all of that noise and clutter, if you like, of 2024, what jumped out to you in terms of tech as being really impactful or indicative of that AI maturity that we were speaking about earlier? And where do we sit as we approach the end of 2024? Are we really looking at revolutionary tech, or are we looking at iterations in a way, to use that very broadly, during the course of 24?
It's, I think, necessarily both. And I think one of the things that we forget about going through all of this is when we talk about AI, we're not just talking about generative AI, but it seems to have kind of flown under the radar because it's boring e-discovery stuff for a lot of us, but really important in helping deliver to our clients the services that they need at a kind of price point that makes the entire thing possible, right? And generative AI is new, but AI itself is absolutely firmly embedded in processes that are very well trodden throughout the legal industry. So there's definitely that aspect at the outset, but then getting further into it, if you think about kind of it's going from the mundane to the sublime, and the mundane would be, well, these technical processes that we all use day in and day out and don't think about at all, versus the generative AI. And generative AI being sublime is getting all of the attention. And I think we do have a bit of fatigue that's building up on generative AI as well. And I think that that's actually kind of stands to reason when you think about what's happening. The technology advances are coming so quickly still that it is virtually impossible to keep up. And so for those who don't have an innate interest like we all do perhaps in this, it's just like, well, I'm not even going to bother with that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But then even for those that are in it and actually interested in it, almost necessarily the product that you're using is going to be some iterations behind what has just been announced. And so you're left feeling a bit deflated and like, well, I wish I was using 4 Omni, whatever it is, rather than just 4, because 4 is so terrible. But 3 months ago, we were like, oh my God, 4 is so awesome. I can't believe this. And so there's just this constant push, and you have to keep going with it. But so I think that's really exciting about how it's working, and all of the funding and interest that's going into it allows us to keep pushing those boundaries. But then you go back to the kind of mundane, and it's like, well, process automation is just delivering huge benefits left, right, and center in the legal industry and in all other industries as well. And there's kind of this digital alignment that's happening. And maybe we'll talk a little later on in the piece about that more broadly, but I think that's one real key benefit as well, is that being swept up in this general excitement about artificial intelligence, we're getting a lot of other things happening all of a sudden that otherwise wouldn't have.
Is that digital alignment both internal and external, or of necessity has to be both internal and external?
I think it has to be internal and external. And this kind of goes to the next question a little bit that I'll touch on, just in terms of maturity, both internally and externally. And I think our customers are in a good place where they can rely to a degree on us having this kind of vested interest in this succeeding, and needing to look into it and needing to put in the resources to figure out how it works and use it to the best that we can. And they're able to take a little bit of a step back and say, well, let us know what happens, and let us know how you're going to use this for us, and maybe let us use this with you. But equally, they've got internal red tape like we all do, which a lot of the time makes it almost impossible for them to do some of the things that we're doing. Ethan Mollick, which you may have all heard of, he's a professor at Wharton, and has written a book, which is an excellent book and an excellent kind of primer to get into this topic. And I encourage people to read it all the time. But he's got this idea of the kind of, what is it? It's the jagged boundary or jagged edge of kind of where generative AI sits, and it's really good at some things and not at others. And you don't know where that is. That's an invisible line. And I think we've got the same kind of problem with adoption as well, where even within our companies, there's this invisible but jagged line of some people are adopting it well and using it well in certain instances, and others are not. And it's not really apparent where that line is, even within a firm or within a company. And so we need to work through that to kind of figure out who's using it well, who's achieving outcomes with it, who's just actually using the product, but they're not doing much because of the variability, because it's a personal thing. We can't just say, well, we're at this benchmark and we are progressing in kind of lockstep.
Karen and Tessa, I want to bring you into this part of the conversation and pick up on a number of things that Graham has just said, but I'm just going to express it in this way for you. And that is that I look at all of the technology that's available out there, and to go to Graham's point, it's mind-boggling, frankly, what's happening. And, you know, it's pretty much mostly available to all of our clients as well. And I can't see how we can sit in our environment, in our legal bubble, for want of a better expression, and not be really, at the very least, trying to keep up, because I can't see how clients are going to be able to afford to instruct us if we don't. So I'm wondering if you have thoughts about that. Karen, Tessa, either of you want to jump in and you know, share those with us?
Look, Terry, I can speak obviously from my own personal
Yeah.
experience at G&T, and the thinking is you absolutely have to engage with this. You know, this is a fundamental shift in the way in which technology has evolved. It will, you know, most definitely change the way in which we deliver our legal services. I think, you know, anyone looking from the outside in would be at pains to come at any other conclusion other than that. And as such, you have no option but to engage in it. And I mean, certainly from my perspective, you know, we've obviously pushed it incredibly hard internally within the organization. You know, we've tried to build up the capability of our lawyers, as well as obviously working with our clients in that space. We've obviously gone through the entire rigor around governance and everything else which you need to do to make sure you use this technology quite safely, because, as I said earlier, it does throw up risks that, you know, other technologies might not have. But we absolutely, you know, through that process, I have actually never seen so much engagement around utilizing a particular tech. I mean, you know, my experience has been daily getting emails from lawyers asking us to help them and see whether generative AI might be able to be used on particular parts of their matters. And you know, we've never, you know, we've always had quite a good culture around that, but we've never had it to this degree. And that is because in their personal lives, you know, I did a session just yesterday to some of the summer clerks that joined the firm, and it was around generative AI. And I asked the clerks, you know, to put up their hands as to who has used generative AI, you know, in their universities, personal capacity, and 100% of hands went up. And that is very telling, because if, you know, we would have done that in respect of other technologies historically, it would not have been the case. So I think because your personal life is meeting your professional life, and because the technology is so accessible and people do see what the benefit is and can see very clearly what this looks like, I think you have no option but to engage in that.
And sometimes it is just pushing through that initial, you know, I'm not even sure how to categorize it. Let me call it technophobia, for want of a better expression. I mean, I've been running some very, very fundamental prompting 101 events, classes, and you can just see almost an aha moment breakthrough, which is amazing and wonderful to see once folks actually put their hands on the tech. So Tessa, what are your thoughts about this? That we have to do that, we have to put our hands on the tech, but also that there's a compelling business reason to do that too.
Totally agree. I mean, you say mind-boggling in terms of the tech out there, Terry. I say overwhelming. From where we sit, it's like we, quite frankly, are really playing in the edges of the sandbox, if I can say that. And you know, you talked about clients looking to law firms to be kind of implementing, engaging, and doing all the hard yards so that they can then benefit. We too, given our size and our resourcing, are looking to the likes of Karen and Graham to kind of, you know, piggyback on the wins and the experiences and the failures too, so that we can learn from you. Because otherwise, where we sit is in a space where we have to rely on either third-party vendors and/or consultants, which is not something that you know, we generally want to be doing from a cost perspective. So we're kind of in that space where yes, the message is evolve or die, so that we must engage, but again, we're kind of that at that level where we're sort of playing with Copilot, for example, within an ecosystem that we already have that's familiar, so as to reduce that friction, I suppose. It's that real tension that I'm sure, despite the scale and the resourcing, you're still dealing with humans no matter where you are. And as we've said, they're on a spectrum. They're on a spectrum of comfort. They're on a spectrum of ability to play. They're really on that spectrum of that growth mindset, I suppose. It's icky. They're having a beginner's mindset, and that's where many of our people are. And I say our generally, not just ours at Moores. But yeah, so we're certainly not as evolved as the Karens and Grahams of the world, but I love that they are.
That's an exciting thing too, though, I think, because it doesn't matter how far advanced you are. This is literally the hardest it will ever be to adopt generative AI, and it will be easier tomorrow. And the technology that gets put out and the vendors that keep putting out the technology have such a vested interest in making it as easy to adopt as possible. So there's almost no chance of being left behind. And I think getting people over that fear factor of having missed the boat as well is really hard to do. But once you do it, it's like, oh, this is good. It is easy. And tomorrow it's even easier.
Because we are
until the technology becomes completely different, and then we're starting from zero again.
Right.
I did listen to a talk about a week ago, as I had said, the technology that is really going to disrupt us has not even been invented yet.
Yes, so buckle up.
But correct.
But I think, is it not also that we're all in this together? Like, that's the other kind of mindset to think about, isn't it? That there's real opportunities for collaboration kind of across the board, if you like, across the spectrum, whether it's clients or tech developers or whatever the case may be. And I'm not sure we've seen that sort of opportunity in quite the same way before. Do you think that's a fair comment?
I think that's an excellent commentary, and I think this technology definitely requires collaboration of the entire legal ecosystem. And what I mean by that is, even when we think about it in the context of universities and educating, the graduates of the future in terms of how they will deal with this type of technology, then push into, how this will all be regulated. So we need to think about that in the courts, how you utilize it internally, how you think about the vendors, the different confidentiality restrictions and undertakings over there. So I actually think it has never been so important to actually collaborate to make sure that we make this a very strong ecosystem and ensure that we are leveraging this tech to deliver on the promises and opportunities that it hopefully will, but at the same time manage many of the downsides that could emerge.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Graham, I know that, sorry, Tessa, go ahead.
No, I was just going to comment on that. We are dealing with 3 vendors who have collaborated together, who ostensibly could be competitors, I suppose, in the market, but have shown incredible foresight in collaborating together with all of their open sort of mindset, I suppose, with one another for a shared outcome of providing a value proposition to us, which they can now market to others. And it's been brilliant for them as a business opportunity, but equally brilliant for us because we're getting something that's customized and has exactly what, a mid-sized kind of firm needs in its platforms. And I think it's a brilliant example of how they've done away with competition and realised the business, the business case for collaboration. And I'd love to see more of that.
There's enough to go round. That's what I think, there's more than enough to go round. So, yeah, Graham, I know that you're going to replicate yourself effectively. So set us up for that and show us what you're going to do.
All right. It's an interesting thing thinking about what's coming up next in 2025. And I'll just share my screen quickly here. Hi there. Can you tell me what sort of legal services you offer?
Sure. We offer a wide range of legal services, including capital markets, competition, construction, corporate advisory, disputes, employment, environment, finance, intellectual property, mergers, acquisitions, real estate, and more. If you have a specific area in mind, let me know.
I like your glasses. Are they new?
Pardon, I didn't catch that. I'm here to help with questions about our legal services or insights. Let me know what you're curious about.
I said I like your glasses. Are they new?
Thanks for the compliment, but I don't have personal items to discuss. I'm here to assist with any questions about our legal services or resources. What can I help you with today?
All right, so we'll cap it. I think this is really interesting, and I mean it's not a perfect technology at this point, but the kind of rapidity with which we're moving ahead in how we can do things. We were all amazed just over 2 years ago that we could get a generative AI to create a song that had some semblance of meaning to a situation we gave it. And we've now progressed so far past that that we can create an avatar like I've just shown you, and point it at literally anything. So this is me recording about 90 seconds of video and audio, putting it into a system, and then giving it the URL of a website, and it becomes the expert in that website. And you might not have seen that there, but when I was setting that up, I can select different languages as well. So it doesn't have to be English, and it doesn't have to be only language I speak. It could be any number of different languages. And this really expands kind of the connectivity that we've got, that we're able to share our content with as well. So our audience is very much attuned to reading text, but that's not the world in general. And we need to kind of think about, well, how do we appeal to the audience and reach them where they are? And these sorts of things, I think, show immense kind of opportunity for engaging with a broader segment of the market, but there's also a huge amount of risk. So we've almost gone to the point of asking, can we do it, and deciding we can do it before asking, should we do it, as with many things. And now we're here. I got an email from this company a few days ago that was proudly touting how I could use this to replace myself in meetings, and people would not know that it was me, and we could just have conversations, and they will think it is really you. And I thought to myself, well, that is a really bad thing to be pushing on your audience, but that email's out there, and I'm sure that there are people who thought that's great. And their tagline was that you can take back the time to do things that really matter rather than talking to your clients. It's like, what could be more important than talking to your clients? But here we are. So I think, though, there are real risks to that as well. A deep fake technology, pretty much, which for myself, I've now put myself up there, and I'm fairly comfortable with that. But the training information that I put up doesn't have to be me necessarily, does it? It needs to be 90 seconds of audio and video of almost anybody. So what does that mean in terms of needing to question when you're engaging with anybody in a Zoom situation or a Teams situation or any situation that you are actually speaking to the person you think you're speaking to? We've had deep fake examples left, right, and center in the last little while that have been very expensive for those that were caught out by them. And this is something that I think we're going to have bad actors leading the way on many of these fronts, figuring out how these new technologies can be exploited, and as us needing to come along to make sure that they can also be used safely and for the right purposes.
So Graham, you're not updating your CV just yet, saying that you can speak 15 languages. Is that the takeaway?
I really should. I really should.
I was thinking that, are we actually at the stage now where we might say that we were saved by the cat filter? You know, it's like, yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And thanks for showing us that, Graham. But looking at that and thinking about impacts, Tessa, I'm wondering whether, apart from that standout example that we've seen from Graham, do you think that we've actually this year arrived at a way to track and measure the impact of the technology? So I guess I'm talking about metrics here. There was a lot of chatter about that at the beginning of the year, whether we could actually pull them out and whether they're actually going to be there. And I'm going to ask you all this question, but if I can kick off with you, Tessa, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so when we talk about the AI kind of maturity spectrum, we are sort of at the lower end of maturity. I'd almost call us immature in that sense in terms of metrics. Like, we're kind of talking real lag metrics in terms of, you know, how many training sessions are people attending, what's the benchmark, and then measuring against benchmark kind of experiences and capabilities with the tools, for example. So we're just being aspirational at this stage, Terry, in terms of how we can measure the impact. Yeah. We do obviously have employee engagement input into all of that, and client engagement scores and things like that. But yeah, I would say we're very much at the beginning of our journey when it comes to metrics.
Yeah.
Yeah, Karen and Graham probably have a whole lot more sophisticated systems that can measure it. If you are going on, you know, the real kind of anecdotal touch and feel, there is that sense that the opportunity of creating more time and space because of the efficiencies and productivity that's being gained, but particularly because of our value pricing billing model, we can't measure in terms of time. So it's really about how people are feeling and how much space has it created for them to do other things. Yeah.
Yeah. I suspect that more people are probably where you are, Tessa, than not. And I will come to you, Karen and Graham, but just a quick additional follow-up there, if I may. Do you see your metrics evolving though? So is it in the back of your mind that they're kind of going to run almost in parallel with as the tech literacy and application expands within your firm as well? So
Yes,
you're looking at them hand in
absolutely.
hand?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a digital evolution strategy from a capability learning and development perspective. But then, of course, that runs in parallel with our own scorecard and how we're going to measure that. So it is actually really nice knowing that we're in a position now, having learned from mistakes, that where we are on that journey concurrently, and that we will be in a position when we're future fit enough to have those metrics at hand. Yeah,
absolutely. Karen, I'm going to come to you as well, Graham, if I may. But Karen, where are you folks on metrics, or what are you seeing in terms of metrics?
Yeah, so I agree with Tessa in that, you know, general sentiment is it gives you a bit more room to think things through. And also you potentially could get to a more polished product, particularly depending on what people do, but with drafting and, you know, obviously we know generative AI is very helpful in that regard. So some of the stuff that fills a lawyer's day, because we know that, you know, lawyers don't only do legal work for all the hours that they are in the office or working from home. You know, there is a lot of different things that one does, you know, looking at email chains and, you know, seeing what the status of that is. So there's lots of use cases there. So it does give them sort of more space. I think in terms of where we are at in terms of metrics, we are starting to get a sense of that now, but I think we will see more of that in 2025. I think, you know, we have certainly used Gen AI on particular like document reviews, for example. Over there, we have a pretty good sense as to what it would have taken if we wouldn't have used generative AI, and then what it will take with generative AI. I will say to you this though, Terry, is some of the feedback we do get from our lawyers is because you have to fact check everything and you have to verify the accuracy, and that's part of the policy that we have in place, because we do know there are obviously limitations around generative AI. You're not getting the benefits that maybe what people would think you are getting. So I think that's going to be a hurdle we need to get through, you know, certainly next year, and hopefully that will evolve as the technology evolves as well. But, you know, there is still that need to check everything, which is very time consuming still. So we are starting to see some measurable impacts, and also our testing, particularly in the e-discovery space as well, with some of those products which have generative AI capability. Again, there are some really you know, exciting, you know, opportunities in that space as well. So we're starting to see them. We're seeing them on particular use cases at this point in time. But again, we'll have to see how that evolves into 25.
Do you think we'll be done at the end of 25 on this, or because the technology itself continues to evolve, it's going to be an ongoing thing that we're going to have to keep focused on?
Terry, I have completely worked out that I will be exhausted for years in now. Like that is where the status quo is. You know, I think this is constantly going to move. I think we are now in an environment where the technology is going to evolve incredibly quickly. That means we are, you know, even when we think about strategies, you know, strategies are having to evolve almost weekly, you know, as Graham mentioned, with, you know, the volume of models that come out and the changing in providers out there. And, you know, and that's going to continue to evolve. I mean, we still haven't seen who the winners are in the space, in the legal, you know, verticals. So again, I think it's going to constantly change, and we are constantly having to, you know, assess it. I know we're going to get to sort of things like billing models as well, because this technology is not cheap. It is not cheap to, you know, when Tessa talks about this, you know, I'm very fortunate in that I have a team, and, you know, G&T have a team that is committed to this, but it is, you know, it is a complex area, and it requires a lot of thought and deliberation as to how, you know, one proceeds, including both the buy, build sort of strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. So my takeaway from that, Karen, is going to be book your holidays for 2025 now, folks. It'll be a really good idea. Graham, the last word on metrics. Where are you folks at, or what are you seeing around that?
Well, it's a good question. And I think that the deeper you dig into it, the harder it becomes to figure out what you're actually measuring. So are you measuring impact, or are you measuring use? And those aren't the same thing. But you might think you're measuring impact and you're only measuring use. And use is imperfect. And so that is continually improving. But having said that, I mean, we have a lot of different places where impact is being felt. And this is, for example, building internal tools that are helping us pull information out of contracts, or doing analysis and pushing it back into Nuix Discover, for example. So get the information, but don't do the context switching where you're making people switch to a different product every time. Use APIs to then push the information back to where the person is used to working and comfortable working, and can consume that information. So it's not shiny lights that are distracting. I love that. I need that all the time. But most people find it distracting. So keep them where they're comfortable and just get them performing better with more information that's coming to them more readily. But then on the other side, we've got the Microsofts of the world, and we've got the big kind of vendors in the information space as well. With CoCounsel is a great example, where literally $1 billion Australian spent acquiring that, and who knows how many hundreds of millions since thrown at that, and that's just in the legal domain. So there's a huge interest in making these tools as approachable as possible, and I think over time we'll kind of just move into the middle there, where we don't have to worry quite so much about the struggle to make this work for us, because it will be made to work for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I read something in the last week or so, I believe it was by 2027, that investment in AI, not just in legal, but in AI, was estimated at 150 billion US. Wow. So, you know, that's a lot of money, as you say, Graham.
Terry, can I just add one more thing? And it was one of the comments that Graham made that sort of prompted me to say this. I think for me also, if one thinks about engagement as impact, I think there is a lot of it currently within the industry. I think more so than what we've ever had over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. I think there is something quite different around generative AI. You know, I see this on a daily basis. I have people calling me saying, "Oh, Karen, can you get me that tool? I've heard from X, Y, or Z." Like, there's almost this FOMO of, you know, people, you know, if fearful of missing out on something that might help them in their day to day. And I've always said that I think technology that does really well for lawyers is technology that is easy to use, meets them where the lawyers work, and also can deliver benefits. And I do think we are you know, getting there if we utilize it appropriately and understand its limitations.
I felt that more this year as well, Karen, and it's anecdotal is what I'm saying here, as opposed to anything else. But 2023 almost felt like, what is this? And 2024 felt like, okay, we need to get into this a bit.
And I think there was, as I said, there was a period of time where I think there was even more concern around it in maybe the middle of the year or so, and there was lots of research out there that was indicating that lawyers are not happy with the outputs. And I think it's about adjusting expectations, because I think there is no doubt, if you are going for perfection, or if you're thinking that things are going to be perfect all the time, this technology is going to let you down at the moment. But if you can utilize it for the stuff it is good at, then I think that issue around expectations changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get into the billing thing, but before we do that, I want to pick up some threads from what all of you have been saying around capabilities. And Tessa, I want to ask this question of you first, but I do want to come to you on this one, Karen and Graham, as well. Lots of discussion about digital and data literacy. It was everywhere, and there were, you know, the beginnings of education programs pretty much everywhere as well. So I'm wondering if at this point in time, in 2024, towards the end, have we reached the situation where people as potential employees are now actively looking at a law firm that they will go to, a legal department, or another option, maybe it's a law company, based on their use of tech, and flipping it to the other side in terms of recruitment? So as you folks are sitting there recruiting people, is it important for you to be looking at potential employees and perhaps even emerging leaders on this scale as well, and their digital and data literacy capabilities? So both sides of the coin, if you like, Tessa. What are your thoughts about that?
So I think you've nailed it, Terry. Both sides of the coin, it is important. And we're seeing that in prospective recruits. They're asking us about our kind of digital literacy levels and want to know what tech they can play with the minute they walk through the doors. So that's been critical for us, but also actually quite a good fire up, you know, for those of us who are struggling with the pace of change. It has really helped that business case from my perspective as a CEO, trying to convince a board that this requires investment and fast and resourcing. I've got some really good data there to support me. Equally, yes, it absolutely becomes something that from an employment perspective, when we're recruiting, we are asking different questions than we've ever asked before, and looking for people with prior experience, of course. But actually what I learned over the last 18 months or 24 months, when we started thinking about having, you know, again, we're sort of laggards in this space, but equally we've had legal technologists in our business operations team for nearly 2 years now, which I think if you looked at our competitors size-wise, they wouldn't be investing in that sort of space there. I've learned that the legal technologists, if you like, or those that are their capabilities are really high, are not always where you're looking for them. And it's fascinating to me that we've had people in marketing and BD, for example, who could just as well be sitting in a legal technologist position or a legal ops position. Certainly the PAs, so personal assistants, legal assistants, some of them are so incredibly skilled. A lot of our admin legal support professionals, they've got unearthed skills that suddenly have come to the fore. And so it's actually been a really good, I think, learning for us that when we are going to market, we are tapping into a much broader talent pool and from broader industries than we've ever seen before. So it's been a great learning for us, but equally the impacts we've seen in terms of diversity within the workplace and different perspectives and experiences has been amazing for culture.
But it does really have that knock-on effect, doesn't it? Where now when you're looking at the workforce profile in a law firm, yes, people may have designated roles where they spend most of their time, but everyone's got to have a certain skill set around this. And also it's very much a multidisciplinary team that you need to bring to bear, no matter what size your firm may be. You may bring them in differently, part-time, casual, whatever, but you still need that skill profile, don't you, across the board?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Karen and Graham, Karen, how are you seeing this question of capabilities? Like, have we still got a gap, do you think, and how are we going about filling that? How have you gone about filling that? And I think, Karen, you touched on that a little bit earlier as well.
Are you talking specifically, Terry, in the context of
Digital and data literacy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, look, we, to your point around whether, new recruits want to work in organizations that they perceive to be innovative or leveraging, the latest technology, I think the answer to that is yes. We've obviously been on this journey for a number of years now. So whilst generative AI has changed and will change the how, we still, have, I suppose, the systems and processes in place from, my team evolving over the years, the various technologies that we've both developed as well as brought in. So in terms of, skills gaps, I mean, obviously education is key. So we are doing lots of training. I mean, we now have a dedicated innovation and technology pathway for our lawyers, and that is at all different levels. And that also is in operational teams as well, that we focus a lot on that. So it's not only the legal training any longer, it's now all the skills that we think are necessary, from the design thinking, project management, tech literacy, generative AI, and the list goes on. A very big focus on that, including, change and mindset, and, how we should think about our work and continuous improvement. So that has been a focus for many years. I think probably certainly what I have observed, particularly in the generative AI space, is my team, which is obviously a multidisciplinary team made up of a number of different individuals with lots of different backgrounds, many lawyers, but project managers, agile, data scientists now. So we really do have quite a mix over there. We are working hand in glove with our lawyers, to support them on their matters. And I see that as only evolving and increasing over the years. And so we embed that capability with them, we help them, but then we have many teams and lawyers that then just go on their own because they've got enough capability. But this is very experimental as well. You can see with the technology, the challenge we're finding at the moment, and I'm sure Tessa and Graham, you'd both agree, it is, sometimes people used to call me and say, Karen, we need to do X. What tech do we have for this, and will it work? And my answer to them normally is like, yes, we've got a tech and it will work, and we know it is tried and tested. It is different with generative AI. Because until we experiment, until we know using the particular documents and or use case that has been provided to us, we can't give clarity as to how well the technology will perform or not. So it's a really interesting one in that it actually is requiring even more engagement with my team and my skill and the team's skills with the lawyers to sort of meet them where they actually sort of need the assistance. So it has been quite an evolution. It's been quite exciting as well. But yes, very focused on that skills gap. And to your point, Terry, around the prompting piece, we ran some prompting boot camps within the firm. They were incredibly well received. I think we underestimate that is a new skill for people. We used to asking something and getting an output that you don't then need to refine. So we were getting feedback based on some of the pilots that the lawyers needed that upskilling. So we focused very heavily on that, and that has been really, really successful. So I think we're going to find all these little aspects that we're going to have to work on as this evolves.
Yeah, absolutely. And Graham, the last word on capabilities from you. Pick up whatever threads from that you would like to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, we've got a really large firm-wide digital transformation program that we've been running for some time now, that's kind of looking at digital ways of working, digital agility, and data fluency. So the way that we're structuring this and approaching it is with a different pathway for our business professionals, our legal professionals, and our firm leaders, and slightly different content for each of those groups as well, because there's different kind of scenarios and use cases for each of them. On the topic of kind of, is this an attraction to the firm for potential employees? I think because of the profile that we have and the kind of reputation we have as an innovative law firm, it's just part and parcel of that. And it would be probably odd for us to exclude the use of generative AI or something like that. So I don't think that it adds anything, but I think it's very much in keeping with the kind of reputation that we have as a firm anyways. And so, yeah, we've got a really big investment in uplifting the digital capabilities of the entire business right across from legal and business.
and no one will escape.
That's right.
I do sometimes lie awake at night worrying about that, not so much escaping, but self-selecting out of it. Like, I do wonder whether there will be parts of, in over the next few years where parts of the workforce are just like, actually, this pace is too much for me. Like, I've just gone through this whole beginner's mindset. I've learned how to use Gen AI tools with the limitations and the risk profiles, and I've really nailed this, but we've already escaped, another 6 months further ahead. And I cannot do it again. I can't keep going back to ground zero, to your point, Karen, in terms of what's around the corner for us.
Yeah.
So I do worry about that, particularly given our size. We can't sort of absorb that attrition in the same way that larger firms might be able to.
Yeah. It's a great point, and it's a very real one. And I think it's the piece that is undermanaged, the change piece or the transformation piece, the human toll of that, I think, is undermanaged. Sorry, Karen, you were going to say something.
No, Terry, I think we're very aligned on what you're saying at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it is going to be, I think what else is going to be important for I think we've always worried about how busy our lawyers are and, adding additional load to them. I think we now need to reflect on that also in terms of like teams like ours, who equally are bearing the brunt of this in terms of just the pace at scale in which this is moving, and it is exhausting. So I do think, though, we probably will settle as a profession and, maybe get comfortable with some of the tech that we've selected for a period of time and just try bed that down to ensure that you get the best out of it, but also that you don't have that change fatigue all the time. But you're going to have to continually look at the market and see what new models are coming out, what you need to build versus buy, etc. So I think it is something we're going to have to manage very carefully.
Yeah,
I think that it's interesting just to think about it, and what you were saying as well, Tessa. I think there will be pushback. It'll almost be like the slow cooking movement as a reaction to fast food at some point. But this idea of authenticity over efficiency. And if you look at LinkedIn, there was something that came out the other day that over 50% of posts on LinkedIn are now artificial intelligence generated, or at least contributed to, and you can spot them a mile away. It's the same bright language with the little icon at the start of every paragraph, and it's like, these are the 17 things you do to become a better person. I'm not going to bother reading any of it because I know that nobody's put any thought into creating it. They've just said, this is something I want to have a post about, and away it goes. And I think we're becoming more wary and jaded as an industry, but as a society as well, where like, I want the human interaction. That's what I'm looking for in social media. I'm not using social media because it's going to be less social than otherwise, right? So if that's what I'm interested in, that's what I want. I think we're going to, as a collective, kind of move back a little bit away from everyone just using it to do things more quickly, but not necessarily better.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm going to jump into that kind of somewhat perhaps controversial topic of billing now. I'm going to say the word out loud, but also law firm business models, because I think the reality is that billing is such a driving force in legal business models that you can't really sensibly speak about one without combining it with the other. Lots of industry reports, we've all read them and we've seen them, and it's talked about the fact that there's record demand of legal services. And I guess in some quarters for some people, that's been translated into an ability to defend the status quo. So all of the things that we've been talking about, you don't need to worry about that. We're all good, nothing to look at here. But we've also seen, I think, an enhanced debate this year, particularly with the focus on generative AI, challenging the billable hour, probably threatening potentially traditional leveraging models. We've also seen that discussion, and you touched on it earlier, Karen, about recovering tech implementation costs and almost like a return or a resurgence of alternative fee arrangements, if we can even sensibly call them that anymore. So Tessa, I wanted to kick off the question to you about this. Where did all of this stuff around billing, I'm going to throw perhaps value into that, and law firm business models, where do you think we've landed at the end of 2024 with that, with kind of the tech piece obviously in the mix there as well?
I think we've moved beyond the kind of catastrophization, the controversy that's on the front page of the Fin Review, to a point where people are actually grappling with the reality of that. The shift, I mean, as you all know, others may not, but Moores is a value-based pricing law firm. So we eschewed time-based billing more than a decade ago. So we had to grapple with that at the time, but we were of a smaller scale, and our client base was of a smaller scale equally as well back then. That I won't deny that it was incredibly difficult, and it was a huge transformation, but it's one that that we've seen the benefits of. And the partners at the time were willing to take that risk. Fast forward now to 2024 and potentially next year and beyond, I feel like the legal ecosystem is so, like, time-based billing is so firmly entrenched in that that it's not just shifting the billing model. It's not just saying, okay, we're going to get rid of timesheets and let's start measuring value and output instead, as we do at Moores. It requires absolute revolution of the whole system. So I love that some of the top end of town is really grappling with that, and they're thinking, I've had conversations with other law firm leaders who are really thinking about pilots within a particular team just to test it. And from what I understand to date, where any of that has ever landed is in an AFA, so an alternative fee arrangement.
Yeah.
They might toy with a retainer, for example, subscription models, that sort of thing. So that there's a certain level of comfort with that. But if we're talking wholesale revolution, where we're kind of dismantling the entire system, I cannot see a future where that happens just yet. There's just so much entrenched resistance to it, and so much risk, like huge risk. It takes a very courageous partnership to take that risk, I think.
Karen, I saw you nodding there. What are your thoughts about this?
My thoughts are, I think things will evolve, and whether it lands up being value-based bidding or alternative fee arrangements or the like, I think at the moment it is probably too early to work out what that looks like. I think any organization and every organization that is currently on a billing-based model or a sort of hourly-based model would be thinking about this at the moment. But I don't think there is clarity yet, Terry, for the reasons that I don't think Gen AI has been adopted to the lengths that we need it to actually inform that decision making. Because as I said to you, there's a lot that goes into this as well. I mean, if you just cut hourly rates, but then don't consider that there has been enormous investment in tech. There has been enormous investment in teams like mine, for example, who are also working alongside the lawyers to deliver out on that matter. It's not going to be sustainable for any law firm longer term. So I think, I actually think we might have more clarity in our 7th year of doing this podcast. Is it 7th next year? I think we might have more clarity next year as we see these metrics start to crystallize a little bit more. And I don't think it's going to be wholesale. So I agree with Tessa. I don't think this is going to be wholesale. It might be in particular areas we identify where generative AI is having a real impact, and you make the adjustments there. But do I think it's going to be a wholesale change in the next 12 months? I don't think it will be.
But as the tech evolves, do you see that there might be a differentiation? And what I'm thinking about it is this: the tech is really good, it's very reliable. Could you do that at a fixed fee? The tech is still evolving. We're not using it wholesale. We're using it kind of more as an assistant. There might be a different fee. I mean, kind of choose whatever elements you want to put in it. But do you see that kind of possibly being experimented with more next year?
Possibly. And I think the other thing, we need to be mindful of is there are still certain restrictions around
Absolutely.
utilizing data on particular client matters. So, you know, you can't have a blanket, this is what we're going to do, because it assumes you use generative AI, but then you've got an exclusion list of many organizations who at the moment are not comfortable with their law firms using generative AI. So, as I said, I think there is still a lot to play out in this you know, generative AI journey for us to get to that, you know, all those sort of conclusions. But absolutely, I think it's not going to be a one size fits all.
And we've got that plethora, I'm just going to interject here, that plethora of professional responsibility guidelines coming out from courts and our professional bodies, which are not all the same, about where we can use it as well. And that must backflow into this discussion as well, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, there's already ambiguity in guidance notes and the like around what we can and can't do. So as I said, and comes back to our, I suppose, the original comment I made around this is going to require ecosystem-wide change to get this all right.
Yes. And, you know, as harmonious as possible as well.
Yeah.
Graham, do you want to chip into this discussion?
I mean, I think the evolution continues, and it is an evolution, and it's a very slow evolution. And in exactly the same ways that we can confidently and competently agree to alternative fee arrangements, whether it's fixed fee or something else, for any of the litany of technologies that we know and use every day in and out, that's where we're going to get to with this eventually as well. But exactly as Karen said, we just don't know the ramifications well enough yet to be able to confidently agree on a model. And our clients are in the same position. They want to ensure that they aren't being taken advantage of. But by the same token, there's a chilling effect that goes into the advancement of using these technologies, because it puts the brakes on a whole group of AI technologies that until now had been agreed and accepted between clients and law firms, and are now inadvertently sometimes being grouped up with generative AI. So there's a lot of rework that gets done to kind of satisfy everyone that no, these things are okay still.
Yeah. Sounds like communication sounds key in all of this still very much. Look, we've reached, for me, what is the sad and exciting part of our episode. Sad because, you know, I have to bring it to an end. Exciting because we're going to do some forecasting. So, Graham, I'm gonna get you to kick us off on this one. But in terms of, you know, looking back, tech adoption, legal service delivery innovation in 2024, what can we look forward to or anticipate, see more or less of, if you like, as you think about 2025?
I think, and I touched on this just briefly earlier with that kind of authenticity over efficiency in some aspects, but I think there's another frame to that we can think of, and that is the growing sophistication of the consumer audience in using generative AI. And the example that I like to give here is with ESG, and the absolute incredible CO2 footprint that is created when we're using different types of generative AI, so text-based versus image-based versus video-based. Nobody really appreciates that, but I think as we move forward, we're starting to gain an appreciation for the absolutely horrific kind of outcomes that are coming about as a result of this. So, for example, I think in 2030, generative AI will use the equivalent amount of electricity to Japan, which is just insane when you think about it. And all of this is an ESG impact, but Scope 3 and the Microsofts of the world and others are taking that on themselves and not really displaying it to the end user at the moment. I think that will shift. There's a frugal AI movement that's beginning that I've seen as well, which I think is fascinating. And that's the idea that instead of using the biggest model that we can, we should be using the minimum viable model effectively. So what's the smallest model that we can get away with that's going to deliver the best outcome? And when you think about it, if the use of creating a piece of text is, I use a mobile phone for this, so you can do 123 questions and answers with the energy in one mobile phone, or you can create 2 images. Now, do I use a model that can create images for all of my text-based questions? That's horribly inefficient because the entire model gets used when we ask a question. Instead, I should be using that minimal viable model and only as much as I need, and that's frugal AI. And I think that's really going to become a kind of issue for global society over the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Tessa, 2025?
I think picking up on the human toll that we were talking about before, and what you just touched on, Graham, in terms of authenticity and consumers becoming a bit more discerning in a world where, you know, there's fraud and deep fakes every corner we turn. I always look first to people in this puzzle, and I think the return of play in the workplace is something that I'm really excited about. I think with this, as we've talked about, the need for experimentation necessarily taps into those critical human skills of curiosity, empathy, and importantly, what I like to call play. Like that is, if we're not tapping into that childlike kind of curiosity that we've sort of had squashed out of us in law school, and really prioritizing creativity now in a world where sort of that human judgment, the verification that we're asked to, and the fact finding that you spoke to, Karen, that when using these tools, those sorts of skills, I think, will become the new value proposition, and that will really be, I think, come to the fore over the next 12 months. We're certainly thinking about it now, and we're talking about it, and we're doing it in terms of our digital empowerment sort of curriculum, and things has gone broader than just the tools and the tech. You know, Karen, you talked about design thinking. Like, who would have thought in law firms and in law schools that we'd be teaching these sorts of skills and actually rewarding these capabilities in people? So that's what I'm excited about. I hope at this time next year we're talking about the rise of play.
Yeah.
I've got a quote that I think you'll love on this, Tessa, which is, the supreme accomplishment is to blur the line between work and play. And it is just so true for me. If you can achieve that, if you can play all day and it is your job, you're in a very good place.
Yeah. I suspect our human skills actually are our differentiator and competitive advantage as well. I
No doubt.
think that's where we are, but the realization will expand. Karen, last word to you, 2025. What's your focus?
I'm going to have a lens of AI on this one with
Yes,
generative
absolutely.
AI. Okay.
Yeah.
So I reflect on the last few years. So 2023 for me was a year of, oh, wow, what is this? Everyone was really on a steep learning curve as to what it is and how it might impact legal service delivery. I think 24, what I have observed, and certainly from my perspective, have been lots of pilots, lots of experimentation, and also lots of focus, I suppose, on that data strategy as well, which I still think will be an ongoing focus into 2025. I do think in 2025, we are going to see it being the year of generative AI use cases emerging in legal. I think they're going to be far more available, and people are going to communicate them a lot more than what we've seen in the last year, because I don't necessarily think people have been able to do it, or everyone has been able to do it this past year. And I do think it's also going to be settling on a number of products for organizations who have been very hard at the pilot phase in 2024.
Yeah. I've got a feeling those use cases may be more sophisticated in 2025. Yeah.
So this is where I think Gen AI, we are on the cusp of something between just the mundane and sort of, just delivering efficiencies to the actual innovation as well. And I do think when I talk about use cases, I think they're going to hit the just efficiency and productivity piece in terms of particular processes that are done within the legal lifecycle. And we shouldn't forget all the operational teams within law firms as well. I mean, there is significant use case over there, I think often forgotten. We should not forget that. We should be focusing very heavily on that. Often the issues that we hit on the legal side obviously don't exist on the operational side, so it's a much easier way to play. But absolutely, I think we're going to be starting to see different ways of engaging with clients, that innovation really could emerge.
Well, that's exciting. Thank you all very, very much. Karen and Tessa, want to thank you hugely also for your contribution through the CLI Advisory Board. Graham, also want to thank you very much for leading our Legal Ops Clinic this year. That's been brilliant as well. It's always special being able to do this session with all of you. Thank you very much again, and happy holidays to you and your family.
Never replace yourself, Graham, with your avatar.
No,
No, that's
We
right.
like doing it in person. Next year, same time, same place.
but you can build one for all of us in
There we
between.
go.
you know.
There we go.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for everything, Terry.
Thanks
Bye.
for bringing us together again, Terry. It's always
Indeed.
fun.
And for all the amazing work you do for the Centre for
Indeed.
Legal Innovation.
Thank you.